Good morning and welcome to the third day of Onf Connect. Hope all of you are having a very productive set of times here and having good discussions. I can tell you that I have had some amazing discussions seeing this community together, having very engaged discussions with people one-on-one, people in the tracks. Most of the tracks have been very engaged. A lot of people have been asking questions. That's wonderful. One particular discussion I'm going to call out because it started in the track, it went to the corridors, and I'm now promised a bottle of wine when I go to New York to have a follow-on discussion. Is Mr. Najab here? Okay, he's not. So I'm just making sure he remembers. This is on video, so we will get that. All right. So we have a full day, as you know, today. We are going to start and go all the way to 6 o'clock. There's going to be one track in the afternoon, which is for members only. So make sure that if you want to go and listen to the reference designs and give your feedback or listen to what they are all about, you need to have a members only badge. And that's the only one which is closed for members only. Anything else is obviously open to anyone who has registered and who is here. So with that, let's get the first panel started. And I'll like to call the moderator. Oh, shit, that's me. OK. I'm Asim Parikh. I'm going to moderate the first panel of the day. And just a quick background about me. I've been at ONF for 2 years. It's been 2 wonderful years. I've come from the industry, been in the industry for 25 plus years, large companies, small companies. And this platform and this place to transform how the industry would evolve over the next 10, 20, 30 years is an amazing platform for me. So I'm very grateful for this community to invite me and accept me into its folds. All right. So before we get started with the panel, some of you might be wondering, what is the Supplier Advisory Board? And what is specifically ESAB and TSAB? So I thought, before I get the panelists on the stage, I would start giving a quick overview of kind of how the Onf governance works. As all of you know, ONF is an operator-led organization by design. Operators guide and steer ONF, and the idea is to keep the transformation away from any of this protection of legacy kind of situations, right? So we have the ONF board, the technical leadership team, which you will hear from this afternoon again, and then the reference design teams. And most of these are led by the operators. Obviously, supply chain partners are invited to participate. We had a use case steering team before we went to the strategic plan. We are in the process of morphing the role and the scope of that. But all of those things, as you see, by design, are operator-led. But the supply chain, and especially the supply chain partners, play a pretty big role in how ONF thinks about this transformation, because obviously someone, as Guru mentioned on Tuesday, someone has to take the ball from where ONF leaves it and take it to the next step. So that's where the 2 supplier advisory boards, SABs, come into play. And we have 2 of them. Each vendor partner gets to nominate 1 person to each board. And by design, there have been 2 because we want the executives to interface with the board, meet with the board, give their recommendations, their ideas of how to take this transformation forward, and hear from the operators directly what the operators are expecting of the supply chain. And then there is a second board, which is the technical SAB, the TSAB, which interfaces with the TLT. And they meet even more frequently with the operators from a technical perspective, and that's where the steering happens of the RDs and all of that. So these are the 2 bodies which we, as a group, called the Supplier Advisory Board. And today's panel is going to have representatives from both. Out of the 5 people, 2 would be from the executive ESAB, and 3 would be from the TSAB. So without further ado, let me invite our panelists to to the stage.
Okay.
Please give them a big round of applause and welcome them. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to have a couple of questions asked to each of them to get things warmed up. But really, this is for you. It's called a fireside chat. Assume there's a virtualized fireplace right here. We're going to allow you to come in and ask questions also. So make sure, and then I'm also encouraging the panel to ask each other questions as kind of, as follow-ons if there's something interesting they say. So we'll start with Brian. So Redis obviously has been one of the longest serving member partner, and we really appreciate their role. And I think it's a pretty historic day for you. You're going to be the last day as a public company CEO.
Over tomorrow, but close enough.
Yeah, close
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so tomorrow you go and become part of Reliance Industries, and congratulations. And
thank you.
Very exciting times ahead. So the first question is, because you have been at ONF this long, describe your original motivations and experiences in joining hands with operators and ONF on this transformational path.
Yeah, for us, it was really looking at our strategic alternatives. So we were traditionally a hardware company. Then we got into telecom software, mostly at the protocol stack level, and then into professional services. And we thought to ourselves, geez, SDN and NFV are happening, decomposition of software and hardware are happening, but there really isn't anybody in the industry, or at least at the time there wasn't, who can be the open source integrator. Understanding hardware, software, professional services, understanding network elements. We have network elements too, but yet being agnostic and somewhat Switzerland to the operators. So we saw it as an opportunity, and that was our thinking, and latched a hold of On.Lab and now this organization to help drive that.
Wonderful, thank you. Any follow-ups from the panel? You guys, most of you are new, but for Intel, so a lot to learn. Great. Let's continue. And George, question for you. So you have been involved with a lot of ONF projects for many years. I'm glad that you, this year, decided to jump in, as Guru says it, with 2 feet into the ocean. And this community is welcoming you. But in your role as an ODM, you have observed kind of firsthand the disaggregation of white boxes and what role it has played in data centers. How do you see and compare and contrast that continuing on in the open networking space?
That's true. Thank you very much for that. First, this whole movement started with mega scale operators. And they were the ones that pushed the envelope to make sure that it wasn't just cost reduction, but also making sure that they can really solve a problem for the use case, especially giving a lot of, push towards software, empowering, and giving a lot of, push for the software features, etc. So that became a direct, sales motion from us to the mega scale operators. As it evolved and everybody started to understand the benefits of this, the ecosystem of software, commercial software partners were created. And that took another, let's say, phase and took a step function in the industry where people started to adopt this, open networking concept and using, let's say, a NOS partner to do the orchestration, to support an orchestration all the way to that level. Now, what's happening is that it became from mega scale operators to tier ones, and especially in the enterprise area. What's missing is from at least our perspective, is the telecom area and the managed services area where ONF is now actively involved and coming to help. And what makes it is that whoever was sitting on the fence, they realize now there's a body that is really pushing and trying to be credible to take the learning from the data center, the successes, like core infrastructure as an example, perfect, to migrate it towards, let's say, into MSO and managed services and telecom area. So this is where ONF is playing the part, and I think this is the right time and the right, let's say, at the bottom of the hockey stick
The
that
inflection point.
that I see it's coming.
The inflection point is there. Perfect. No, very good. Question for Christian then. So Christian, you and your team have worked very closely with ONF and operators like Sprint and others to develop open source, robust mobile core optimized for IoT that you have demonstrated multiple times with ONF at Barcelona, Mobile World Congress, and the Los Angeles shows and all of that. So describe the expected engagement of ONF as ONF embarks on creating this new reference designs around MCORD and exemplar platforms. What is your expected engagement there? What do you plan to bring to the table?
Yeah, as you know, we have collaborated very closely with ONF, Sprint, and other partners. Moving forward, Converged Access Core is a very important direction. From what we hear from operators and most service providers, this is a direction they want to go toward too. Now, it's a complex reference design, right? The Converged Access Core. What we would like to see is a phased approach to such a design. As you know, as you mentioned, we have the wireless core available in ONF. You heard yesterday from Dutch Telecom some strong interest for T-Mobile, in Poland for fixed wireless usage model. We might hear later today what is Sprint interest in the wireless core. So, as we move forward, this Converged Access Core, do it in such a way that we can have, concrete deliverable, right? Transition from an RD to an exemplar platform. We have also seen system integrator, people like GS Lab, recently, joining and contributing to harden such a core for, operational deployment. Another aspect is this multi-access edge cloud, right? In this, edge deployment, we will see, component at the edges of the network. Maybe the data plane will run at the edges. We'll see component also somewhere, in another cloud, maybe a public cloud, such as a control plane, right? So, how all this work together. And this is what we'd like to, contribute with the community to define this reference design, have operators, more operators and more system integrators join the party with us to take this forward.
Very good, thank you. All right, going to ETRAN. And ETRAN obviously has been in the industry as an established vendor of sorts for many years, well respected in the access space. Describe your continuing journey and we are very happy that you have decided to kind of come and join this transformation. So describe your journey from being a traditional, proprietary box kind of vendor of access equipment into an enthusiastic software-enabled broadband access CEBA open source project supporter and contributor.
Yeah, to your point, we are a little bit unique because we are an incumbent broadband access systems provider, and we've really taken a different approach in embracing this shift to open disaggregated networks. And we understand that there may be some things that we have to lose or cannibalize our traditional market segment, but we've seen a lot more upside opportunity by embracing that. If you look back about 5 years ago, we were planning out our next generation fiber access systems. At that time, really, CORD wasn't well defined. A lot of these reference architectures we have today, that was very early days of SDN controllers coming out. But we had seen, to George and Brian's point, from the data center world, this kind of new approach, architectural approach to how you build and design networks, all about open disaggregation, integration with open source platforms. So we knew that generally the market was going to move that direction, including for broadband access systems. And so when we decided to kind of look for our next generation fiber access platform, we were already building this, we kind of took a clean slate approach and, went with a completely, modular, kind of software architecture, hardware architecture, so that when CORD came along and, some of these reference designs were being defined, we already really had a lot of solution or a lot of the, whether software capabilities and hardware platforms that fit really well into those ecosystems. And so, we saw joining ONF as an opportunity. We saw a lot of operators that wanted to embrace these designs and wanted to deploy it, but really lacked so there were some missing pieces to make it happen, whether it was integration with their back office systems or just the support of, taking these systems and making them field deployable. And so we've seen that as the upside opportunity. And so we've really embraced it and moving forward and already engaged with multiple tier one operators as they kind of go down this transformation path.
No, we applaud you for that. That's wonderful that you've done that. And I think hopefully others from your incumbent set of vendors would listen to your advice and your experiences. Please stand up on the top of a tower and announce this more.
I'll let them drag their feet. That's fine.
All right. And obviously, as all of us heard, Infosys has joined us this week. We are very excited to have Infosys. It brings some very unique dimension to this community, which we lacked up till now, frankly. And a question to Vikram is, Infosys is a unique partner where you have some 200,000 engineers you can tap into if the opportunity is right.
Yeah.
So you can bring this tremendous amount of software talent. And when we are talking about SDN, we are talking about NFV, we are talking about the transformation we are doing around virtualization, open source, merchant silicon. Obviously, software is a major game. So describe the internal analysis that you did and what that led you to become an ONF partner first place, right? And what are the market indicators which will help you what are you monitoring to see at what point to apply a good section of the 200,000 developers to this cause?
Yep, certainly. So we have a very good vantage point from the operator's perspective. We are involved in their IT, developing a lot of the OSS basis systems, involved in their network engineering aspects, both the legacy and the new, and also on their operations part, ensuring that those networks can be operated well, right? We've been following the complete NFV SDN. We've been working on a lot of these projects in the labs with a lot of the operators, in partnership with a lot of OEMs and technology vendors and partners as well, right? What we are seeing in the last 12 months to 18 months is those projects are moving from the labs into real world, right? And that's the first indicator, to say that this is becoming serious. Operators are betting their future on these technologies. And they want, what we see ourselves is playing a role of a partner who can harden the software which was in the labs and seeing that it can be deployed into their networks, right? So that's the first thing that we got. The second part is also the fact that even when we used to look at the charter of a lot of ONF and others, we used to see there are too many things being focused on. And that just gives one a feeling of, less alignment between the different operators, between different partners on what needs to be really, what will really lead to, network simplicity and adoption, right? What we have seen with the exemplar platforms is that now most of the operators are saying these are the 4 areas that we want to focus on. That's again a great indicator that people know what they want and they are betting their bandwidth and future on that. So that is what we will continue watching. It's a continuous chain. How those projects move from lab projects to deployments, to pilot deployments, to large-scale deployments, how the operations bodies of these operators embrace those technologies and make it part of the mainstream. And that is what will continue giving us more and more confidence as we move ahead.
Very good. Any questions from the audience as we finish the first round before I get to the next one? All right, let's continue on. If you have questions, keep them ready. We'll come to you very soon. So coming back and starting from the top again, so Brian, what are the 3 suggestions you would like to give the operators who want to transform their infrastructure leveraging open networking?
Yeah, so by the way, we're working with multiple customers, but there's one particular customer and operator who, I'm most proud of because they've gotten it right and being able to make this happen. The first piece is they've done the heavy lifting on getting engagement and buy-in from everybody from procurement leader to CFO to all the stakeholders on the ground who would ultimately end up implementing this particular solution. It has been a lot of work for them. They have put their credibility on the line. They have probably worried about perceptions in their jobs, but yet they've advanced it forward. So my recommendation would be to make sure that you've got buy-in and tie-off with all the stakeholders. And that means like incentives. So if you think about an operations person who's on the ground running the network, they're probably not compensated on implementing open source. They're probably compensated on uptime, making sure the network works. And so until you change those behaviors and align those behaviors, you're not going to get the result that you want. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that, and again, this particular operator's done a nice job with it, is to bring the various stakeholders together. So in this example, Radis will view us as the disruptor. They've brought in an IT integrator, brought in a hardware player amongst others, and they've really forced us to all work together. And we've started to define our roles, and that's going to parlay into success. And so, but the key is that bringing everybody together and making sure that they do a good job of preserving each of the individual vendors' roles, I think is critical. The last piece is to start with something that you know can win. And I think in this example, I think SIBA or SIBA-like is the winner. Things like wireless disaggregation and O-RAN and others, I know we're talking different organizations here, is a bigger nut. Maybe more of a focus, maybe bigger ROI, but you got to start with something you know and get a win. Because I'm convinced once a SIBA is commercially deployed in the network, I'm not talking about 100 subscribers, I'm talking about millions of subscribers, then I think we're going to see a cascade. So focus on something you can deliver on.
So that's what you expect the tipping point to be?
I do.
Okay.
I do. That first commercial deployment, because everybody is waiting for somebody to do it, to jump off the ledge, to jump off the rock. And it's not a POC and it's not a trial, it's live. And once that happens, we're going to be having very different conversations as an industry. Yeah.
Right. So, George, what are the few things which ONF as an organization, as a community is doing right? And what are the couple of things it can do better to drive the agenda forward?
Okay, first I agree with Brian wholeheartedly. Second, what the Guru and ONF and all of you have done is tremendous in my humble opinion, and also the opinion of others that I work with or I interface with, especially when we are getting pulled into this open networking momentum. First, I think first and foremost is reduction of risk, or how I put it in terms of mitigating the risk, and not completely, but with the formation of exemplar, platforms and tested them and bring them to that level of fruition, not necessarily all the way. That is tremendous, momentum for operators or anybody to take advantage of. That's, I would say, risk reduction. Mm-hmm. Second is the body has tremendous credibility. I think if we succeed, as Brian said, with one exemplar or two exemplar, I even say SIBA, others as well, not just only that, but that gives a lot of credibility as well. Third, in my humble opinion, is you guys are looking for, we are all busy taking what we have and executing. So this body is looking for forward-looking. And I think the architectural requirements of, follow-on use cases, not make them point product, but make them a journey as a roadmap. You guys are tremendous in doing that, and we all really appreciate it. In terms of what can you do better, I think in a positive sense, you're already doing, I think, more pushing for more adoption. Seriously, bringing the operators to the table if there's some way to do that, and tier ones, and start building this momentum forward. As Brian said, if one or two picks up, and there is a really serious example of how it works, and we've seen it in the data center area, it will move forward. The other is very difficult, but at least I can mention it, is the issue of legacy, especially with the operators and telecom. If there is a way, and it's very hard, I know, if there's a way, there is some way of architecturally make that also adaptable to the new, era. And if-
Brownfield to
Exactly,
brownfield to.
exactly. It's just
Yep.
feeding on this. I think it will be tremendous, in my humble opinion.
Thank you. I think the first part of the criticism, well taken. I think
It's not
Guru,
criti-
Larry,
by
and
the way, it's not a
Bill have done a great job.
no,
Simon and I need to get our game up, is what I hear.
No. You misinterpreting. It's not a criticism. No. I think, like I said, I need to clarify. We're on the record. You guys have done a tremendous job, and I
Yeah.
think this is not looking backwards. This is looking forward. And like I said, this is not just me representing, EdgeCore or this body, but the people that we speak to, the market pool that we see. Everybody's waiting. Everybody's waiting to that threshold. And if we can have one or two good operators come in, like AT&T, Comcast, I mentioned that because they deserve it, because they've done it. Others come in. I'm really intrigued by Deutsche Telekom, what I heard. Things like that, if it moves, I think we will see the tipping point, as Brian said.
Very good. No, thanks. Any follow-ups, any questions from the audience before we continue on? We have a few minutes, and I don't want to just keep on asking all the questions. There's a question from IDC. Can someone get a microphone here, please?
This is sort of a follow-on to the previous question, but to the whole panel, if we had this conference as it's videotaped now into the boardrooms of every major organization that needs to hear the message, what would it be? What's the simple message that you would tell all the people out there that really need to be involved? And a couple of different answers is really good.
Is the message to the operators, or is it to the vendor community, or?
I'm just saying all those involved, so it could be both.
Yeah.
But particularly to the operators, because it seems like there's a kernel here, but not everybody's here. So what would be that key message that would make them want to get involved?
I'll take a stab. First of all, it's very evident, and we've seen with the keynote speakers, on Tuesday, that the data explosion, it's moving so fast, faster than the compute power. So it has to be, something has to be done to the infrastructure. And then the cost is also increasing. And if the operators look at the data explosion relative to cost, and also the availability and the responsiveness to make sure that they are able to not only adopt or respond to the customer base, but also try to be profitable, they have to do something. And this is where SDN comes, in my humble opinion. This is where software gets the power and build up that cost-effective infrastructure from hardware, and on top of it, build what you exactly need to move forward to serve that data explosion and be ahead of it, and also at the same time try to really push your ROI, because there's no way the operators or anybody will keep up with this momentum. That would be my message to the board.
What are you trying to accomplish? I think I think that there is some paralysis amongst what I said. Move that to the side earlier. Is it about a certain percentage of your network being open source? Is it around ARPU preservation or expansion? Is it about topology changes, moving towards the edge? Whatever it is, CapEx, OpEx, TCO, decide what that is and go for it. Jump off the rock. I mean, the one last remaining hurdle, other than passing through the gates, is this question around one neck to choke and support. And it was the same question last year, and to some extent the year before that. And so I think we need to move past the paralysis and get into those final stages of getting these new network elements lit up by the end of 19. I think that's a realistic assumption, maybe Q1 or Q2 of 20. But now we're sort of in that one-year window. So I think we need to pick up the pace on deployment.
Great. So I think that's a great question for maybe some of the vendor community from the EdTran perspective. Let's ask that. What do you plan to do as EdTran to kind of productize and support CEBA-based commercial products?
Yeah.
That's the RD you are very involved?
Good question. So yes, absolutely, we do plan to productize and support, commercial grade deployments of SIBA. That's the upside opportunity that we see, and that's maybe not in the traditional closed ecosystem approach. Obviously, that's more, there are some hardware components, some software components that complement, not replace the open source, core piece of the reference designs. And so there's a lot of that's going to be needed to really make these operational in the field. There's going to be ITOSS adapters. There's going to be different variations of hardware implementations. There's going to be different, just operational tool sets that operators are going to need. And then that's what we can help with. In addition to that, I guess to kind of build on Brian's point, a lot of people are waiting, thinking they have to kind of wait for this thing to be fully baked before they can get started. Actually, a lot of those software components and stuff that I talked about does allow an incremental approach. You can actually start today and then, use some commercial grade complementary components and then maybe even phase those out and replace those by open source over time. So that is one way to start incrementally instead of just waiting for someone else to have the product fully baked a few years from now. Also on George's point, as far as the installed base and helping transition, a lot of what we can help with also is how do you take your brownfield installed base and kind of blend that together with this new architectural approach under a common automation engine. And so that's other things that we can help with as part of our solution set.
Okay, so I think I'm now counting up. That means I'm already over my time. So any question, last question from the audience before we close this panel and go to the next topic? This question from Margaret on the right.
So we know that this industry is not fully baked, right? And things are not 100% there. And so the comment about, as a vendor, to, I guess, fill the holes so that it's basically commercial and production ready. Do you see that as another way of a vendor lock-in?
The question is, for Natran perspective, no. I mean, I think if you architect the components in a modular enough architecture and use the right APIs and stuff, you can avoid vendor lock-in. So with the right architecture, I mean, if all of the core pieces are pure open designed and you're just using modules that, just think of it as apps in an app ecosystem that use the API but are easily replaceable, then it's pretty straightforward. As long as the core components, like from an orchestration perspective, like you're using ONAP or OSM, and then you're using ONOS as your controller and Volta, a lot of those abstraction layers that are built into the core platform kind of help prevent vendor lock-in that we've seen in the past.
Sorry if I didn't get to the other panelists, but thank you very much for your time. We are 5 minutes late, I'm told.